the topic cyber risk and frauds in finance regulation. And for this, I would like to invite on stage Mr. PK Hari Hara, who is the CFO at Cognizant Technology Solutions. Giving a brief introduction, PK Hari is truly versatile CFO, carries a rich suite of skills and experience to serve as a trusted partner and strategic advisor to the business leadership. He's currently serving as India CFO and whole-time director at Cognizant Technology Solutions India Private Limited, and also serving on other boards including few overseas entities. His solid contribution to the finance world has been rewarded with awards and recognitions at various events. The most recent one would be by Dun Bradstreet, recognizing him as one of the finance elite leaders of 2023. With this, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully I'm audible right at the back. All right, fantastic. Okay, well, I came, just towards afternoon, but hearing the session of Navneet, I'm sure you have already had your good dose of lunch as well as some good dose on risk and risk management, etc. Am I right? Fair? All right, so I'll try to keep this a little bit of fun and fact-filled kind of a thing than going through with a lot of theory around what is cyber risk, how are we going to get stuck, and making you paranoid. All right? So we'll be unconventional because cyber warfare is unconventional, right? We'll start with the Q&A right up front. But the Q&A has to be different in that it's going to be me asking you and you'll help me with some answers. That'll get me an understanding of where do we stand and what kind of messaging do we go from here. Good? All right. So let's start with the easy ones, considering it's all finance guys in the room largely. Which is the topmost economy, the best performing economy in the world by GDP? Number one. US. Excellent. Any idea of the number, the GDP, roughly? Let's say, okay. Anybody? Guesses? Awesome. About 26 trillion. Okay, who goes next? Number two. China. How far are they? 18. Fantastic. Looks like somebody is already using Google now. All right, who comes third? And I'm going to stop with this. I'm not going to go with top 10. I promise you. Who's third? Huh? Well, take nominal GDP. Japan. And Japan is far behind or very close? In a sense? About 4.8 trillion. So we see the number one up to about 25, 26 trill, followed by an 18 in China, and then coming to the closest being Japan, and Germany is very close, but the gap between China and Japan is significant, between 18 and about 5. And now, we also do realize that each of these economies have grown big, but they also have their own share of debts, right? No economy has grown just on its own. They obviously have their balance sheet. If you look at it, there's a good amount of assets, but there is also a good amount of liability. What if I tell you there is a totally different economy which has got no debts, no liabilities, but which by GDP, as I speak now, stands at even above Japan, number 3 economy in the world, and no liabilities at all. The balance sheet is like only assets. Would you believe that? Anything stands there in your mind? Huh? Norway? Okay. Okay, I'm going to give, like I said, it's an unconventional story that we're going with. So the unconventional reality there, and reality, I'm not talking in thin air. The reality is the third largest economy in the world, if you put together the computation by all means of GDP, the total cost involved, the total man hours spent, etc., all of it put together, is basically the cyber crime economy. No jokes. As we speak, 2023, the cyber crime economy, the cost of cyber crime economy, the GDP, the total impact computed there for the kind of big risk that we are looking at. And one thing which attracts me to this story around cyber is like going back in time, and I'll tell within this room, I also used to be like a white hacker. 20, 30 years back, when I almost started my career, I had a lot of interest in Windows, the kernel level, work at that, etc. There were things like soft ties and good things. So I had a little bit of interest there, but still was not a black hacker, a white hacker definitely. But from those days when we were actually doing that thing, what we call as cyber warfare today, it did not exist. In those days it was like zero. Whatever we were doing was actually trying to go into the kernel of the Windows, which is the root of the operating system, trying to identify what else is happening there, what's happening behind the scene that you see in the front, etc. I don't know how many of you have worked with the Windows of 2000s and all that, and even Excel of 97 and 2006, etc. I'm sure, yeah, there are a few hands. We used to have something called as Easter egg. For those who have not seen that or heard about it, please go and do a Google, and you'll see things which are very interesting, which is basically something that was hidden within the Windows programming itself. You go by a series of steps. You have to create a folder on the desktop, rename it in one way, rename it in another one, and then the Windows creators' names will start flowing on your screen like a PowerPoint presentation. It was an Easter egg buried within that. Excel 97 and even 2006, I think, had a beautiful game of, I think it had something to do with the oil and and a lorry going over it. All this were built within this kind of programs. So that is where we were in those days. It was basically people trying to do it more for fun or trying to put their name into it in some form. Okay, leave the names of the creators over there. More of fun. From there to now, if you look at it, the cyber world has changed, and changed in a huge way. And why it has changed? Ideas? Why did it change to become something of an economy by itself of 8 trillion? Any ideas? What would have really brought this up to in its current shape? Huh? Because of technology acceleration. Fantastic, yes. But there is something more interesting to it. When all this big jump happened, guess? This huge jump between being a small, simple cyber issue to actually becoming a cyber warfare and actually being a huge cyber risk. When did that jump happen? Over the last 2 decades, if you see, from 2001 to almost 2019-20, it was like extremely low, extremely low. The only reason it became big was thanks to, unfortunately, or no thanks to COVID. Because COVID pushed all of us back into our homes, and we still had to work. Everybody was finding ways and means to do work, so we really went all the way to the cloud. Right? All companies had to necessarily use the cloud. So a lot of data got stored on the cloud. Cloud became your default home. You were working on that. And then there were other engineers who were sitting at home having spare time, and then they said, why not? Come on, let's do this and have some fun. I've read about engineers who have actually resigned from their jobs and doing this as their full-time business, being part of a gang and actually like making money in ways that you can never imagine or in ways that you can never identify. Again, no tax also. Being in India, having a tax-free income is not an easy thing, right? So there is so much to it. I'll go to some of the interesting things to discuss further. Again, more questions as we go into the slide. Cyber risk. Now, how do you define cyber risk? Before that, I will first ask, what is cyber? What do we understand when you say cyber? We try to connect it to internet. We try to say it is something connected to the internet or data or whatever. But where does cyber come from? It's basically from the science of cybernetics, which is basically a science to do with communication and control of machines, automatic communication and control. It had really nothing to do with computers, trust me. It was a Greek word. It was more about a guy who will steer the ship, steersman, from those days. And cybernetics, from that we carved out cyber, started attaching it with everything that was automatically controlled and communicated. So that's how we got into cyber. So this is just a wordplay that I was giving here. In our part of the state, which is in Tamil Nadu, when we write cyber, it is actually, you can read it as either a cipher or cyber, in Tamil when you write it. So 2001, the days when I am talking about and when I did my initial white hacker days, the risk of cyber was cipher. When I did in Tamil, it's the same word. It was cipher risk, 0. 20 years later, it's a huge one. It's like a separate economy by itself. That is where we stand. But to understand the cyber risk, we need to understand where does the risk finally come into being. What is the starting point? where does it all start? And that starts with a vulnerability. Now, how do we understand a vulnerability? I'm going to give you some practical examples. When I recently drove into one of the temples in Tamil Nadu, I parked my car somewhere, and nexarc obviously has all the automatic locking system and all that. So comfortably I got out of the car because I know that the temple is far away. I have to take a local auto again. So I parked my car, I got out, took an auto and immediately went. Right? Now I didn't lock my car consciously or unconsciously. Now this constitutes a vulnerability. Okay, it's a simple example. The vulnerability here is man-made. Sometimes the vulnerability can be a design that is built in the system. What if Nexon had a system, or they had built, the Tata Nexon had built a system of remote control lock. You press the lock button, but it still does not lock. Is a system defect. That is a vulnerability. Threat is the next level. In my same example, I took off in the auto, and then somebody else was around in the neighborhood. He or she saw that I went out, I did not lock my door, and they saw that there is an opportunity, and then they go and try to open the car. Then they are exploiting a vulnerability, it becomes a threat, right? And now when the threat becomes a risk, it becomes a risk when I have some valuable stored in my car. Let's say I have put a few kilos of gold, I wish I had. I've left something there in the car, and this guy comes in, he steals that thing over from the car, then it actually is a possibility of a serious risk. So this is basically how it goes. The reason I'm giving you this background is because each one of us have to go back and think, where do we have a vulnerability in our system in the first place? I mean, it's kind of very dry when you read about it. When I did my CISA back in time, the theory was like extremely dry. I can tell you that. It was like so dry. When you do a information systems audit, you have to understand about databases, you have to understand about the relationship between the different DBMS, how do you solve for challenges around networking and all that. But when I actually supported it with an interesting book that the CISA, the IASACA had given me, it all came together very nicely. And the book was called, I think, The Transparent Society. And it is a book of about 20 years back. The author was, I think, 𝗙𝗵𝗏. But when I read the book, completed the book, it helped me to understand CISA, helped me to understand the cyber risk, everything, but it also made me paranoid. Completely. Trust me, go back and read that book. You will find so much of things that's so interesting and so relevant even for today's life. It talks about how we are going to deploy technology, use technology so extensively that eventually you are surrendering your freedom to the tech around you. And you will be preyed upon. Your privacy will be completely gone, is what the author actually writes about. And that's the truth today. If you look at it, we have still not gone that far in using technology as compared to some of the Western world. But look at what a typical home in the US does. You have an Amazon Echo that's stuck in multiple different places inside the home. Right? You say, hey Alexa, switch on the AC, switch off. Right from there to Amazon actually gives you ideas to say, put one dot near the washing machine so that the next time when you run out of stock of your detergent, you can just tell it and it will add it to your cart and will order it on your behalf. So it's like interconnected devices. And Cisco's recent report says, I think by end of this year or next, world over, there is going to be 3x the number of humans. 3x the number of humans. So if there are, let's say, 1 million humans, there is going to be 3 million interconnected devices with sensors prevalent in the world. That's the level of interconnected devices that we are living with. So with so much of interconnected devices around us, now we have to think, do we have a serious risk around us? The possibility is immense. And now consider the other additional factor that a lot of these devices have a default password that can be used to reboot, right? And there are very few devices, let's say, give the devil its due, give credit where it is due. Apple has got somewhat a better mechanism, so which is why they are not easy targets. But most of the other systems that run on Android and most of the small electronics that we buy, probably including this one, which we get from China, have got a standard password which can be, used, which can be done online, and they can reboot the whole system. Then from there, whatever they do with this system, including a TV that you have, now I'm becoming almost like 𝗙𝗵𝗏. And I'm telling you the paranoia that I went through. Now, that's a real possibility, considering 3x the times of humans that we have. So, do we have serious challenges around us in terms of cyber risk? What do you think? Seriously, yes. And then there are these all different kind of things, that we have around us. And these are all like, little bits and parcels of cyber risk. I don't know how much of it, has been covered in the morning, because I wasn't here in the morning. Phishing, obviously, you have heard of. I would presume that a lot of you are aware of phishing. Now, why is it called phishing? It's almost like, when you go for fishing, truly, the F fishing. And from there, you have to actually put a bait, wait for the fish to, grab that, and then eventually you pull it out. In a similar way, you are putting a bait, or rather the hacker is actually putting a bait for you, waiting for you to bite it, and once you do it, done, right? It's a form of social engineering. I'll give you an interesting thing later if you have time on why PH is being used instead of F. There is some other history to it. Smishing. Anybody? Fantastic. SMS. Yes. So phishing in the form of SMS, and that's even more risky, and that's becoming even more popular these days, because why it's even more risky is because when you get an SMS and it says that your account will be logged out today, just click this link to immediately activate, you don't even know where that link is going to take you, right? It's only a bit.ly or a small link that you have. You don't know whether genuinely there is a problem, or this is actually somebody that's making it up, you don't know. And sometimes, or rather most of the times, the hackers are so good that the sender address actually comes off as ATSBI, something like that. You tend to believe it's actually coming from your bank itself. So that's smishing. Be very careful when you are getting SMS with links, especially talking about your PF. And I've had an example of this also, I should tell you this. One of my relatives, he had a call from somebody talking about this man's PF, including the exact amount lying in his PF account. The guy had retired like 2 years back. And the caller knew exactly how much amount was there in his PF account, and he was telling him, you have to now log in, I am putting you on an IVR, you have to update your details, otherwise your account will get locked. That's the extent of damage that's going around. Wishing is basically voice-based phishing. It's the case that I spoke about now. Farming, skimming, there are more of it. Maybe I'll spare you of some more technicalities over there. But this one, that spear phishing or BEC, business email compromise, is something that we all should be knowing about. And I can talk of a practical example that we had. When we had one of our practical days in office, challenging days in office. I mean, which day is not challenging for a CFO, right? Every day could be. And a challenging day at office, you're sitting there, and then you get an email from the CEO of the company saying that I'm currently sitting with the CEO of so-and-so company, a software company. We are striking a deal. Let's go ahead and make this wire. It's an advance amount we have to pay today, and then the whole thing will be signed off today. If you don't do it today, the deal will not go through. So here are the account details. Make sure that this is sent immediately. The wire is sent, and send me a confirmation mail once you are done. There is an email. Pakka. Everything is like so very good. So very good. You won't have any reason to disbelieve, right? Now what do? This is where BEC comes in. This is exactly what we call as spear phishing or a BEC, a business email compromise, where these guys know clearly who to identify and target. They come to you, they know that you are the particular CFO, and it's no rocket science to identify who's the CFO of a particular company. You go and Google up, you have Rocket Reach, you have all the different sites from which you can know who are the directors of a company, what positions they are, etc. And send one nice email. The only thing they need to do is make it sound exactly like your CEO's language. And if there is something there in the language that puts you off, because you know exactly how your CEO will write to you, and that again proves why it is so important to be truly connected with your executive leadership, right? I've known of companies where the CFO has not even spoken to the CEO in a long time. They've been like, on mails and chats. So they don't know what this guy, how does he really speak? But if you truly know exactly what is his language, and this happened in one of the cases where a particular women leader, she identified a BEC mail that came to her from the CEO. It asked her to pay a particular amount of money. She had all reasons to believe this is not from the CEO because everything else was very good. but there was only one thing that she identified as a key thing, and this is a truth, practical case, real life example. I'm not making it up. I'm just not saying the name. There is only one thing that she found as something wrong with the email, which was that her CEO has never told her thanks or please, and these two words were in the email. Trust me, truth is there on record. She identified that and she said, something seriously wrong here. This is not my man. No way. Right? So, your antennas have to be always up. As a finance guy, what do? Trust but verify. Right? That's your mantra. That's a core. So, we have to always be on alert, especially knowing fully well the size of cyber warfare that we are dealing with. So, BEC is a significant thing that we are all aimed at. And then ransomware, obviously, ever since we started working or living in the cloud, our judgment has been clouded, right? And that's where ransomware comes into play. These guys use one of the social engineering techniques to come and identify, some personal information. Probably you have the habit, or somebody in your team has got the habit of going, sitting in a Starbucks and logging in and working stuff from there. And then every other guy who's walking behind, looks at the screen and they know what is being actually done there. So the next day this person goes, the Starbucks guy can say, hey, you know what, I think by this time you have a call now. I saw it on your agenda yesterday. This is the way life has become. The truth, I've seen this again, happened in Hong Kong. The waiter actually came in and told this one person, saying that you have a call now, I saw it on your calendar. So now if that is happening, that's the level of openness that you have, then you can be caught in any form, right? They get to have some information of you, then they will use all that information to either do a brute force attack, to understand your password, to get into your systems, understand what you're doing, and then from there, the door opens. Once they get in there, done. They will lock up your system, and then they'll tell you, it's basically ransom, like a kidnap. They get into your system and say, I am locking it up, give me money, and then I can open it up for you. All right, I consciously chose this particular color to see that it's actually bleeding, right? Okay, how many cyber crimes could occur in this 20-minute session that I'm speaking of? Reported crimes. Reported only I'm talking about. It's about 2,400 cyber crimes are reported in a day average, which leads you to about 35 crimes could be happening now in this 20-minute session, between 30 to 35. Right? And trust me when I say this, anybody who has been through a cyber attack, anybody who has been taken for a ride, would you actually want to come up and say, hey, yeah, I was a scapegoat? Would you like doing that? And I'm telling you, this is based on only reported crimes. And the number of hacking attempts, every 35 seconds there is a hacking attempt in today's world. Cost of cybercrime, this I was talking about anyway. From 2001, it was cipher, it was 0. And to 2021, when we all moved to the cloud, 6.5 million victims. And that 2020 or 21 was the worst year. One of the worst years then, comparing from 01 to 21 basically. All right, and then what is the costliest year in the 2 decades? It was 2021 at that point, but now where we are, it's actually gotten much worse. As we speak, 2022 was estimated at about 6.5 trillion, 23 is estimated at 8 trillion, 2025, the cybercrime cost is pegged at $10.5 trillion. There are enough studies and research reports available online. If you guys want to actually take this back to your board and tell them why it is important for us to look at this part very seriously. And World Economic Forum in their 2020 meeting and later also, they have formulated and published a booklet for the board to consider cyber risk as a very serious one. How should the board actually take this? What are the things that the board should be working on? There is a particular booklet available on the World Economic Forum, 𝗙𝗶HIforum.org. You can download the report and read through. A very, very interesting one. All right. Now, the last couple of things, 80% of reported cyber crimes in the technology sector, that's where I come from, 80% of the crimes basically could be attributed to one simple thing, that's phishing. So, what that actually means for us, phishing is one of the real problems that we need to address as leaders. Now, how do you go about doing it? It's actually, I'm going into the next slide now without going there. Basically, tools and strategies to address the cyber risk. One of the key things you need to be doing is not just invest in more technology, not just invest in more tools to attack cyber risk, but more importantly, prepare your human force to actually be alive, awake and aware of what is coming. I'll tell you one more recent example. This, I think it probably would have been tabled in a virus conference a couple of days ago, or maybe it's still yet to come out. It's about a Spanish aerospace company. And if you heard about it, a Spanish aerospace company recently was hacked big time, by a motivated group of hackers. And these guys actually got into their systems with one key intent. Just get in there, understand all the intricacies of whatever they are building for long haul flights, all the technicalities that they have, all the patents under development, etc. Because all that is going to go back not just for money. They are a patriotic group of hackers coming from North Korea. Read about this, look up Lazarus, or they are called the Hidden Cobra. This is a network. They did a great hack now very recently, and on that, Spanish aerospace company, the company was very good, they had all the technology in place. There was only one door that these guys used to come in, and that's human. There was a guy working in the company who was contacted by a recruiter on LinkedIn, and all of us, I'm sure, are using LinkedIn. A recruiter from Meta, Facebook. This guy pinged him and said, I have a great job for you, would you be interested? He said, oh, why not? Let me try. And then the recruiter says, I've got a project for you, you have to do this couple of small projects, you have to do it, work on it, show to me that you can actually crack it. 2 small files. This guy downloads, executes, done, the door is open. He did not even realize what he was doing. He downloaded, he opened it's like a C++ project, he opened it, he worked on it. This guy was kind of hoping that he's going to be placed with Facebook. Or he opened the doors for them. So that's the biggest threat that we have. This is one thing I should have spoken about, but I will leave it for you to actually do some more homework there. MOVEit is one of the biggest threat for this year. There's a piece of software called MOVEit, owned by a company called Progress Software Corporation. As of now, as we speak, it's about $10.5 billion impact from only disclosed parties as of now. And this is big time, a huge one that's going around in the US. A lot of state departments, health departments, everything, their data is out in the open now. And Zoom, for example, if many of you have been using Zoom, when Zoom got hacked, 1,000 accounts of Zoom was being sold on the dark web for $2 each. $2 for 1,000 accounts detail. And that's how the dark web operates. The dark web is about 5,000x of the size of our internet. Now you can imagine what are we going against. I'll finish in a couple of minutes. All right, I'm going to skip this slide, but you can see the last line alone. It's about 190K impact per second as we speak. That's the impact of cybercrime cost. Hopefully these guys will circulate the deck also to you later, and I have put in a lot of additional reads as part of the annexure there. But very quickly, this is one thing that you need to see. This is one of the key tools and strategy to identify risk. It's called a cybersecurity framework that's coming from the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Techniques. That is a website of NIST. They are at version 1 is about to move to version 2.1. That's a new standard that is coming in. You can read more about it. I've given the links there in the annexure there. Transparency in finance function was one that I was supposed to talk about. I'm sure we don't have so much of time. But we cannot be ignorant of the cyber risk around us. I'm sure we have heard this proverb, ignorance is bliss. The question is, if ignorance is bliss, why aren't more people happier? It's not that this alone is going to be bliss. What is more important is to be, finance is a source of power. You are the source of the business, you are the lifeblood. So it's not just ignorance is bliss, but knowledge is power. You have to be knowledgeable and be on top of it, and that's how you take care of this whole thing for your company. Finally, this one last piece, balance sheet impact. How do you assess? There is an institute called FAIR Institute, FAIR, fairinstitute.org is the website. They publish standards on how to actually compute numbers and put down the risks in a dollar terms. And this is an act for the CISOs and the ARM teams to do it, and then it can come down to the board finally. Fairinstitute.org. So I said all is fair in love and war, but when it comes to cyber war, fair is all. That's the ultimate destination. You just need to look at FAIR Institute. All right, with that I will conclude. I think there is a lot more. These are examples of how the dashboards look like when you do a FAIR assessment. And then there is an annexure here. When you get this, there's a lot of stuff that you can click through and read. a lot of information that you can download as well, because it's a huge area and I'm very passionate about cyber. If I go on, it could be like one full day. So I will stop with this. Hopefully it made some sense for you. Thank you so much.